Dawn bled slowly over the Apennine Mountains, a pale orange light dissolving into the winter fog. The airfield near Pisa shivered under the cold breath of January 27, 1945. Rows of Republic P-47 Thunderbolts squatted on the tarmac like iron beasts at rest, their canopies filmed with frost, their engines silent yet heavy with promise. 18-year-old Rundo D Costa Canario moved through the vapor trails of exhaust and dew, his flight suit slightly oversized, his eyes far older than his face. He was Brazil's youngest combat pilot, a boy entrusted with a machine that weighed 8 tons and carried the firepower of a battleship turret. Around him, American ground crews shouted over the whine of starters. Portuguese and English merged into the chaos of war's lingua franca. His commander, Captain Alberto Torres, slapped his shoulder before climbing into his own Thunderbolt. "Remember, Garoto," he said through his mask, "the P-47 isn't a dancer. It's a hammer. You don't dodge, you smash." The boy nodded, almost smiling. Somewhere beyond the clouds, the German 8th Army was retreating north. Somewhere down there, steel and gasoline waited to meet the hammer. Inside the cockpit, Canario flicked the magneto switches. The Pratt & Whitney R2800 engine coughed, growled, then erupted into a steady, earth-shaking roar. Gauges trembled, oil pressure rose, and the propeller's spinning disk caught the dawn like a halo of molten light. "Febra 1, ready for takeoff," his voice cracked over the radio. The control tower responded in clipped American tones. "Brazilian squadron, you are cleared. Godspeed." The runway was a ribbon of frost and fear. As Canario pushed the throttle, the Thunderbolt lurched forward, wheels hammering the concrete. The plane gathered speed until the world narrowed into a single line of horizon. At 90 miles per hour, the nose lifted and the earth fell away. The war shrank beneath him, rivers like silver veins, fields scarred by shellfire, the ancient land of Italy turning slowly under the wings of a boy. From above, the sun pierced through the mist, and the narrator's calm, omniscient voice could have whispered, "On that morning, an 18-year-old child carried the weight of a continent on half a tank of fuel and an idea of glory that war would soon rewrite." The radio cracked alive above the rhythmic drone of engines. "Febra Squadron, target convoy sighted, northbound road, coordinates 48 by 12, altitude 1,000 meters, attack formation, go." Below, the Italian winter rolled past like an old film reel, snow-mottled fields, narrow rivers gleaming like cracked glass. Villagers crouched in silence. The German retreat was crawling north through the valley, armored columns, trucks, and fuel carriers threading between skeletal poplars. The air shimmered faintly from exhaust and distant fire. Canario's gloved hands tightened on the stick. The Thunderbolt responded with a low growl, banking hard into sunlight. The formation of silver P-47s stretched in an elegant arc before folding into a dive. 8 falling hammers descending through cloud and cold air. At 5,000 feet, the world became sound and velocity. The radio went silent. No one spoke when the earth filled the canopy. Canario toggled the gun switch. 8 50 caliber Browning machine guns armed. The sight ring trembled over the lead tank. "You smash," he remembered Torres saying. He pressed the trigger. The Thunderbolt roared, and from its wings erupted lines of incandescent fire, tracer rounds cutting the morning apart. The rounds struck the Tiger's turret. Sparks burst outward like a furnace exploding open. The tank's hatch flew skyward. Then came the flame, orange, violent, alive. One, then another. 3 Tiger tanks burning on the road like molten sculptures. The boy's voice broke into a laugh that nobody heard over the thunder. "Target down! Target down!" The squadron circled low, chewing through the column. Bullets hammered trucks. Fuel barrels blossomed into pillars of fire. Smoke rose thick enough to choke the sky. Italian farmers, hidden in barns and ruins, would later swear they saw angels descending, angels that screamed and left trails of lightning behind them. Canario spotted a German Kubelwagen racing for cover near a factory compound. He rolled left, dove again, and squeezed the trigger. The truck disintegrated in a single heartbeat. A flash, a bloom, and then nothing but dust. The mission clock read 0917. The ground below was chaos and silence fused together, engines burning, men fleeing, snow melting in fire. Over the intercom, Captain Torres's voice was calm but firm. "Pull up, Febra Squadron. That's enough. Let's bring our birds home." Canario pulled on the stick, and the Thunderbolt climbed through its own smoke, wings glinting with soot and sunlight. He was alive, his blood alive, the machine unbroken. He had done everything right. He did not yet know that his greatest battle was waiting not with the enemy, but with his own mistakes. History, when seen from altitude, is a geometry of alliances and ambitions. In 1944, the world had grown weary of its own fire. Yet, in that fatigue, Brazil had chosen to step forward, the only South American nation to send an expeditionary force to the European front. The Força Expedicionária Brasileira, the Brazilian Expeditionary Force, had crossed the Atlantic not as conquerors, but as apprentices of global war, bearing a green star within a blue circle, an emblem of optimism flown into a continent buried under snow and ruins. The Allied High Command had given them a modest theatre, the Italian peninsula, fractured by mountains and stubborn resistance. To the north lay the Gothic Line, the last chain of German defence before Austria. Every mile of advance demanded fire from above. And so, the P-47 Thunderbolt became their language of destruction. Designed in American factories where steel met mathematics, the P-47 was not elegant. It was colossal. An airframe forged around the Pratt & Whitney R2800 Double Wasp, an engine that could drag the very sky into submission. The Thunderbolt's weight, often criticized, became its armor, its size, its salvation. It could dive faster than any enemy piston engine plane, could absorb bullets like a fortress, and still return home with smoke curling from its wounds. The Americans called it the Jug. The Brazilians, half in awe and half in fear, called it O Martelo do Céu, the Hammer of Heaven. Strategically, its purpose was clear: to crush what the infantry could not reach, to disrupt convoys, destroy bridges, and break morale before the Allied advance. But in the philosophy of war, it carried something deeper: the shift from aerial duels of knights to industrial annihilation from the air. The P-47 did not dance. It punished. It represented the new doctrine of mass and durability: win not by grace, but by endurance. Within this doctrine, a young pilot like Rundo D. Costa Canario became both warrior and experiment. Human instinct welded to machine precision. Each mission was a calculation of survivability, each success a statistic in the great ledger of attrition. From the control rooms in Naples to the mud roads near Bologna, the rhythm was the same. Thunderbolts rise, targets vanish, and the war machine grinds forward. To history, these missions are footnotes. To those who flew them, they were acts of faith. Faith that steel could protect youth, that courage could guide tonnage, and that somewhere behind the roaring engines, their country's flag still meant something. High above the Apennines, as Canario and Torres turned homeward that morning, the doctrine of the Thunderbolt was no longer theory. It was survival written in fuel, in fire, and in the trembling of a boy's hand on the throttle. He had grown up beneath the thunder before he ever learned to fly. In Bahia, storms would roll from the Atlantic like slow gods, filling the sky with light and noise. When he was a child, Rundo Canario used to climb the rooftop of his father's blacksmith shop and listen to the hammer on the anvil below. The rhythm, steady and final, was the sound of creation through violence. He never forgot it. That same rhythm now pulsed through the wings of the P-47 Thunderbolt. Every time he touched the throttle, he felt the ghost of that hammer, each vibration a reminder that steel answered only to strength. He was 18, still boy enough to be reckless, man enough to hide the tremor in his hands. In training, the Americans had laughed gently at the way he saluted too sharply, how he whispered Portuguese prayers before takeoff. But they had also seen his precision, the way he learned engine tempo like a musician, how he could feel stall pressure in his fingertips before the gauges warned him. Kid flies by instinct, they said, like the planes reading him. To Canario, the Thunderbolt was both ally and adversary. It demanded respect. The cockpit was cramped, hot and deafening. The oxygen mask tasted of rubber and metal. Sweat slid down his spine even in the cold. He called the plane Ela, she, as if speaking to a temperamental animal that could be coaxed but never tamed. Sometimes, when he was alone before dawn, he would stand beneath the machine and run his fingers along the rivets on its fuselage, whispering, "You and I, Menina, we just have to bring each other home." He carried no illusions of glory. He had seen too many wrecks, twisted propellers like broken halos, burnt fuselages smoking beside the runways. But in the strange arithmetic of war, fear and purpose had fused inside him. The thought of dying did not frighten him as much as the thought of dying without meaning. He wanted to be useful, to prove that a Brazilian boy, trained by Americans and forged in someone else's war, could still matter. When he looked at the sky, he did not see nations or doctrines. He saw space to be brave. That morning, after the attack, he looked out from his cockpit at the distant Alps glowing white beyond the haze. His pulse was steady, his confidence quiet and clean. He believed the mission was over, and below the sound of the engine, the narrator's voice murmured through the hum of altitude. Every war hides its betrayal inside the calm. For those who live by the hammer, the silence after impact is only the pause before the fracture. The sky above northern Italy shimmered with smoke. Below, the German convoy burned like a broken necklace of fire. Beads of flame scattered across the valley. Canario's squadron regrouped, climbing through the rising heat, engines howling with the satisfaction of victory. Then it happened. The small, human error that history often hides behind a single sentence. While banking over the industrial edge of Modena, Canario rolled too tight, too low. The right wing dipped, just an inch too far. He heard a metallic scream louder than his heartbeat. The Thunderbolt's wingtip tore through the top of a factory chimney, shearing 1/3 of the right wing clean away. The impact jolted his skull against the canopy. Warning lights flashed like frantic eyes across the instrument panel. The aircraft shuddered, protesting against physics itself. "Febra 1, do you read?" Torres's voice cracked through static. Canario's breath came in short bursts. The control stick trembled in his hands. The plane listed violently to the right, nose dipping. Smoke poured from the ruptured aileron housing. I hit something. Right wing's gone," he gasped. "Eject! Jump, Garotto! Jump!" But the boy looked at the altimeter. 3,000 feet and falling fast. Too low for parachutes, too slow for fear. He clenched his jaw, forcing his hand against the trembling stick. The Thunderbolt moaned, twisting under asymmetric lift. He cut throttle slightly, trimmed the remaining control surfaces, and prayed not with words, but with instinct. A miracle of engineering, or perhaps of will, unfolded. Despite losing part of its wing, the Thunderbolt steadied itself. The massive weight of its engine and broad fuselage gave it a stubborn equilibrium, like a wounded animal refusing to fall. The flight manual never predicted this, but the machine, like its pilot, refused logic. "Still flying," Canario whispered, his voice half disbelief, half defiance. He began the slow climb toward home, eyes fixed on the sunlit horizon. But fate, relentless and without irony, was not done. From the west, two silhouettes approached, sleek, fast, familiar. British Spitfires, their elliptical wings cutting through the haze, friendly colours. Relief surged through him for a moment. Then the radio erupted in panic. "Unknown aircraft at 1 o'clock. Fire! Fire!" Before he could respond, the air around him turned to lightning. Tracer rounds ripped through the fuselage. A dozen impacts in a heartbeat. The cockpit shook. Glass shattered. The tail assembly splintered under a storm of bullets. The smell of burning insulation filled his lungs. "Cease fire! I'm friendly! Friendly!" he screamed into the radio. But the words dissolved in static and gunfire. Then silence. The Spitfires broke off, their pilots realizing too late the markings they'd mistaken in the glare. Canario looked over his shoulder. The Thunderbolt's tail was a ruin of twisted metal and canvas, control cables flailing in the wind. He was alone again, stitched together by steel and stubbornness, thousands of feet from safety. He tapped the panel gently, as if speaking to a dying friend. "Come on, Menina. Just a little more." The aircraft responded with a faint vibration, a tremor that felt almost alive. Somewhere between engineering and miracle, the Thunderbolt kept flying. The sun had begun to fade behind the Apennines when the battered Thunderbolt reached friendly skies. The control tower at Pisa could already hear the rasp in Canario's transmissions, half static, half breath. February 1, returning, damaged, landing request, static. Then the calm American voice of the controller. Negative February 1, runway occupied. Hold pattern for emergency landing inbound. Hold pattern. The words struck harder than enemy fire. He had been holding the world together with torn aluminum for 30 minutes. The right wing was barely more than a skeleton, the tail a shredded flag. The hydraulic pressure gauge flickered near zero. Fuel was down to fumes. He banked the Thunderbolt gently into a circle over the coastline. The aircraft groaned, protesting every turn. From the tower, ground crews watched in disbelief, a half-winged giant limping across the twilight sky. Captain Torres had landed minutes earlier, sprinting to the edge of the runway, headset clutched to his ear. "Let him down now, damn it! He won't last another circuit." But regulations ruled before mercy. Canario made one more circle. Each second stretched into a lifetime of vibration. Smoke trailed from the fuselage like a shadow trying to catch its own soul. Finally, clearance came through. "Runway clear. February 1, you're go for landing. God help you." He aligned the Thunderbolt with the runway lights. Two trembling lines of gold on grey concrete. His left hand rested on the throttle, right on the stick. The crippled wing dragged unevenly, fighting him all the way down. At 100 feet, the world blurred. At 50, the plane yawed violently right. At 10, he pulled up, straightened, and the P-47 slammed into the runway with a sound like metal being torn from history itself. The landing gear collapsed, sparks sprayed in sheets. The machine skidded sideways, half flying, half dying, until it finally stopped in a billow of smoke and dust. Silence. Then movement. Ground crews running, fire engines howling, Torres breaking through them all. He climbed the wreckage and tore open the cockpit canopy. Inside, Rundo D. Costa Canario was sitting upright, eyes wide, face streaked with soot and blood. He was alive. The men who pulled him out swore later that the boy was laughing, not from joy, but from disbelief that anything still could. The Thunderbolt, bruised and burned, was towed back to the hangar the next day. Mechanics counted 84 bullet holes, a destroyed tail, and the missing section of wing. Yet after 6 weeks of repair, it flew again. 50 more combat missions before war's end. Pilots across the 350th Fighter Group began calling it O Passero que voltou, the bird that came back. And among them, when stories were told at mess tents lit by lanterns and whiskey, someone always ended with the same line. An 18-year-old boy once brought a broken Thunderbolt home. History often misremembers victory as a matter of brilliance. But in truth, wars are won by endurance, by machines that refuse to break, and men who refuse to let them. The P-47 Thunderbolt was not graceful. It was heavy, blunt, and unromantic, the aerial embodiment of industry. Its designers in New York and Connecticut had not built a duelist. They had built a survivor. With its armor-plated cockpit, massive air-cooled radial engine, and thick wings of forged alloy, it was designed for the ugly half of the sky, the half filled with flak and fire. And in that design lived a philosophy that survival itself could be a form of strength greater than elegance. When Canario's right wing sheared away, the world witnessed not an accident, but the fulfillment of a doctrine. The Thunderbolt had been conceived on the principle that no single failure should doom it. Its broad fuselage distributed lift unevenly, but sufficiently. Its airframe could absorb punishment far beyond any manual's expectation. The engineers had built a plane that could forgive human error, a weapon that protected courage from being wasted by youth. Yet machines alone do not return home. It was Canario's decision, that refusal to eject, that quiet, irrational faith, that gave meaning to the steel. The Thunderbolt's strength became a mirror of the boy's own. Together, they crossed the border between design and destiny. From a strategic view, this incident became a parable whispered among pilots. If the Thunderbolt can fly with one wing, so can you. But beyond tactics and engineering, something subtler emerged. The bond between man and machine at the height of mechanized war. In earlier centuries, soldiers had named their swords. In the 20th, pilots named their planes. The same intimacy endured. Belief that metal could inherit spirit. In the months that followed, other Thunderbolts would dive into clouds over the Po Valley, strafing trains, bridges, and tanks. Most would not return. But those who did carried Canario's legend like a charm against fate. Every time they throttled into a storm of flak, they remembered that somewhere in their formation, a boy once flew home on half a wing. War, at its purest, is not about killing. It is about persisting, through noise, through fear, through the collapse of reason, until persistence itself becomes a form of victory. And thus, amid the debris of Modena and the smoke of northern Italy, one truth rose clearer than any flag. The greatest weapon of the Allied sky was not firepower, nor design, but the stubborn endurance of the human will that refused to fall even when everything else was breaking. After the war, Italy rebuilt in silence. The burned convoys turned to rust, the valleys greened again, and the sky forgot the sound of guns. Somewhere in a forgotten hangar near Pisa, the Thunderbolt that had limped home was retired, its scars sealed under fresh paint, its name stenciled faintly on the side. Menina de Ferro, Iron Girl. Rundo D. Costa Canario returned to Brazil in 1946. He never flew again. He worked as a mechanic, married quietly, raised children who would never know the smell of burning fuel at altitude. When asked about the war, he only said, "The plane did not save me. We saved each other." Decades later, the restored Thunderbolt was displayed at an air museum in Sao Paulo. Visitors admired the aircraft's monstrous scale, its battle damage still visible beneath layers of varnish. Few noticed the small engraving near the cockpit, almost erased by time. She flew with one wing and taught me how to keep the other. The guidebooks call it a testament to Allied engineering, but those who listen closely, in the hush between footsteps, might still hear the echo of a boy's breath steadying a dying machine across the sky. And above all the noise of history, the narrator's voice lingers like a final whisper across the wind. Sometimes immortality is not granted to those who never fall, but to those who refuse to.